Assalamu alaikum and welcome to UCTV, community platform and only on UCTV. Death of General Qassum Solaimani, who was killed by drone attack on Friday, ordered by the President of the United States of America. A very powerful figure who was mourned by millions, and his death was celebrated by just as many. We have many questions. Why did the President of the United States order his assassinations now? Who actually benefits? Did the President of the United States cross legal parameters? Will we see the phoenix, the Daesh phoenix, rise again? To unpick some of these questions, I'm delighted to say that we have Adnan Khan with me. Assalamu alaikum, Adnan.
Walaikum assalam.
It's good to have you back. It's been a long time.
Been a while.
It's been a long time. Adnan, you know what I want to start with is, I want you to talk us through is, who is this Qassum Solaimani? What was the personality?
Solaimani. It's difficult without trying to sound like you're eulogizing people, but the head, the leader of what's popularly known as the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. For ease of reference, you don't really have similar military figures in the West, but easily the second most powerful person in Iran, behind the Ayatollah. Presidents, prime ministers come and go with elections. Two people who have permanent posts, who direct policy, direct foreign affairs, direct the domestic agenda, have a direct influence on Iran's involvement in other countries. An extremely powerful figure within Iranian society and within the Iranian revolution that took over in 1979. So from that angle, an extremely important person.
It's very, very important. And of course, the audience can get involved in the discussion. You know, we're on Facebook, so you send us messages or give us a call on 01254 413 118. Get involved. The community platform is your platform. Is there is a war? Is there a war? I mean, when you talk about war, we make assumption that two countries, e.g. Iran and United States, but there's no war on their soil. The war is if there's war taking place,
Let's try and define terms first. What do you mean by a war? The entire region, as it stands, has been in the grip of a war for the best part of 2 decades. Most of which has taken place in Syria lately and Iraq prior. Both Iran and the United States and their respective allies have been involved in those wars in some degree or capacity throughout that period. So is there a new war on the horizon? No. Even if the theoretical worst happens and this morphs into a conflict that takes place directly between Iran and the United States, well, they've been going at it through proxies and through other people's lands and other groups and militias for, like I said, at the very least 2 decades and possibly longer. So there's no new war on the horizon. It wouldn't be a new war if it morphed into that. But I understand what you mean by the question, which is this going to lead to direct conflict between Iran and the United States? Absolutely not. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't sit here and predict future events. You can only try and extrapolate based on understanding of past events and the contextual circumstances that exist right now. There is some conspiracy which I don't want to delve into, that all of this is...
But the non-conspiracies is always interesting.
They're interesting, but they're very rarely rooted in fact, and even if they are, they sound like you've got your tin hat on, and therefore people aren't very receptive to them. Whilst we do think Trump is of an extremely limited intellect and a narcissistic persona, I struggle to believe that America conducts its foreign policy on the momentary whim of an idiot. So the
So it's
fact,
planned.
so I don't think they just took the strike without having weighed up A, the consequences, and B, without having played the war games and tried to see where the avenues where this action might lead down and how we deal with those eventualities. For example,
Yeah.
just to round up this part on it, for example, there's reports in the Iraqi media today, statements from the Iraqi government saying that the overnight missile retaliation, so-called retaliation from Iran, the Iraqi government was notified of it beforehand, and they communicated this to the United States. The United States soldiers had taken cover and shielded themselves in the appropriate way that they saw fit. There are 0 American casualties according to the American Foreign Office and the American Department of Defense. And therefore, whilst it's a face-saving step, it feels all very calculated, very tiptoeing around the situation without engaging with what you call the war. I don't think it leads there.
Well, it's almost as if President of the United States, who you have defined and beautifully actually, is he the fall guy? Is there a sort of a group of people who, as you said, is a calculated risk that was taken? Is he the fall guy? And is he not bright enough to realize that he's actually the fall guy?
I don't really like the phrasing of the question, but I'll engage with it and then try and reframe.
Okay.
So if we buy the narrative is that America wants to pursue Iran and Irani interests and Irani militias and Iran's potentially airspace and land, etc., and Trump happens to be the fall guy, the figurehead, so-called, then you could possibly make a case. The case you could possibly make is Israel has been pushing for greater engagement against Iran, at least publicly, for the past decade. The Obama administration tried to deal with it by getting a treaty put in place, which gave Iran some of what they wanted, some enriched uranium, etc., and also they thought deterred them from seeking or pursuing a nuclear weapon. In the midst of all that happening, at the time, Benjamin Netanyahu visited the States, addressed the Congress without the American president's invitation, a completely atypical thing to happen, without precedent, and addressed the Congress and said the steps that America was taking in trying to reach a quote-unquote peace with Iran were actually troubling, threatened Israel's security, made the region less stable, etc. Trump isn't prepared to go down those lines. Since he's come in, he's gone down the alternative, 180-degree alternative avenue of cancelling that very deal, pulling America out of it, and threatening more sanctions, placing more sanctions upon Iran, withholding the funds that they previously promised they would be releasing. So in all of this, I guess the parties and the people in power do affect the narrative of the policy at the very least. So you have people like John Bolton, who was special advisor for a while. He's been openly agitating for a war with Iran for a long time. You've got a lot of the Republicans. You've seen them come out. I follow quite a lot of these people, on Twitter and stuff. You've seen them come out in their droves and hail Trump for taking the step, appreciate as if it's a positive, and try to build the narrative that this was a necessary step that's a few years in the making, a few years too late, and there's no loss here. But the phrasing of the question, when he says, is Trump the fall guy? You can only have a fall guy for a thing that an event that's actually going to take place. I will eat my words if 10, 15 days from now we are sat here discussing an actual war with Iran. Then I'll say possibly Trump's been pushed into the step by those behind him because, like I say, he's an idiot.
So who's benefiting? I mean, who's actually benefiting from shooting and from killing a general?
This is a peculiar question because benefit and harm are a weird criteria to assess things by, but they both are. That's actually whether it's an unintended consequence or not. Allahu Alam. But they both are benefiting because in America, I think there are 2 or 3 key benefits that they seek from this. One, there was a clamour domestically in America, even now, the vast majority of the public do feel like America shouldn't be engaged in the Middle East, shouldn't have their forces stationed there. Trump ran on an anti-war banner, anti-war campaign, on promising to disengage. He thinks he's followed through on that somewhat by removing US forces, or some of them from Iraq and Syria and some of them from Afghanistan, etc., and then having to redeploy troops because of escalations, etc. This gives them an excuse for another 10 years, this engagement. Secondly, it's an election year. And election years, as American presidents often do, like Nixon did when they were engaged in Vietnam, Cambodia, and that area, an airstrike is usually quite good fuel for giving heat to uneducated, unintellectual patriotism, which is, chants of USA, without understanding what that means. But the Iranians also haven't lost much, and that's a weird thing to try and approach from the opposite
Somebody
direction.
must be losing somewhere.
Well, the millions of innocents whose lives are being jeopardized are the only ones who lose out. Why the Iranians haven't lost, or why I think they haven't lost anything. The idea that the world thinks that America can push around any country, that's quite a well-established fact already. There's nothing new being, displayed to the world in that exercise of power. It gives Iran, you saw the absolute millions, the hordes of people who turned out.
With 50 deaths.
In a stampede, only heard of in Hajj, usually.
Yes.
Millions of people on the streets. Those very same people, or at least a select few of them, or a portion of them, were on the streets protesting against fuel price rises a mere few months ago. There's nothing like the pretense or the real threat of a common enemy to unite a people. So like I said, if it was an unintended consequence, so be it. But you get a same massive wave of that patriotic nationalist fervor in Iran. You get Iran's narrative that they've tried to push for a while, which is America and its allies do want to see Iran toppled and destabilized, and they will go to any lengths to try and do it. This achieves 2 things. One, it continues to allow them excuses to be in places like Yemen and Syria, where they openly boast, even in Jummah khutbahs, that we have 4 capitals. That sectarian line that I'm not going to go down. 4 capitals in the Middle East. And secondly, you've seen people, Muslims, coming out and eulogizing the guy who has been killed. Someone who's passed away. If it's a normal person, we don't speak ill of them. The chapter is closed, it's between them and Allah. But you've got to understand the person's position. This is a murderer, a butcher of Muslims. You cannot just try to place him on a pedestal that he's not worthy of. And we, I guess all peoples do, but I'm concerned with the Muslim condition. We have this habit of lionizing people who are not worthy of the position simply because of statements made against who we perceive as the quote-unquote the enemy. So you've seen this with Saddam Hussein. You've millions of fans across the Muslim world. You've seen it with Gaddafi once he was killed. You'll see it with people like Qassum Solaimani. I can go through scores of examples of Solaimani's own involvement as the head of the Iranian corps. Syria is the latest, Yemen, etc. But even the less well-known stuff, the so-called perception of Iran being a counterbalance or an enemy to America. 9/11 happens, 2001. And within days, Soleimani meets American ambassadors in Switzerland, personally, passes messages back and forth, says we'll give you whatever support you need to topple the Taliban, because they had an anti-Shia agenda. So he's with them in that. So the enmity of the so-called Wahhabis overtakes his enmity of America at this point. America's dilly-dallying over the strategy, what to do, when to do it. So the Iranians in October 2001 passed them a map with detailed sites within Afghanistan, obviously because they had their own intelligence, of who to target, when to target, how to target. He was the head of the IRGC at that point as well. In Pakistan, raw agents have been caught. The Indian Secret Service have been caught numerous times. The Chief Commissioner of Karachi Police gave a press conference on this, and he directly pointed to Solaimani and the IRGC being involved within terrorism within Balochistan and within the areas where there's Shia population in Pakistan. This guy's been engaged in this sectarian strife all of his life. So this idea that Iran suddenly gets to hold this a victim narrative and Muslims feeling like they're being attacked, that's the other benefit that they've drawn out of it.
So if we think about it, what you've said, that his death has galvanized the people of Iran, where there's been unity, correct?
Might want to read some comments also.
Yes, well, we can take some comments. Do we have some comments? I think we can take some comments. Let's see. Let's read some of the comments. It will take time. On Facebook. Sorry, but I'm not, unless my system is gone.
I could make a couple of jokes, but I think you'll get
I don't
offended.
think I'm getting any on my telephone. But call in. Sometimes systems, we have hiccups. And I suppose those hiccups happen when you don't want them to happen. But during 01254 413 118, and we'll see if we can get some of your responses responded to. But I don't want to lose the thread, Adnan. His death has galvanized the people of Iran, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Temporarily, yes.
Temporarily, it has galvanized. How has that impacted the non-Shia population?
I don't know. It's been a few days, so anybody who claims to know is either exaggerating or lying. You don't know that because.
But we have seen images of people actually celebrating.
That's true. That's true. But what I'm saying is, those celebrating, will probably within Iran will only bring trouble to themselves. I've seen those images. But what I mean by when you say how's it impacted the non-Shia, this isn't really a Shia-Sunni thing. The actual debate is between the Iranians and the United States, as it was. But what I'm saying when assessing that sectarian strife I was referring to is that you shouldn't forget the role of a person who suddenly goes from monster to hero just because he's been killed by someone else who's directly complicit in the murder of Muslims, i.e. the United States of America. Everything stays within context, and sometimes Allah wipes out one evil from the hand of another. So Saudi's games in the Middle East are directly for a power grab. They are colluding with America. This is a completely open secret to try and topple Iran, and Iran has its own camp in this battle, and neither of them seem to care how many millions are affected, how many millions are refugees, how many millions have died, just so they can play out their narcissism and egotistical games.
Yeah, but it's going to impact the rest of the world. It's going to impact us in United Kingdom. It will impact Europe. It will impact when you have the refugee crisis. We've seen that what happened in Syria. We're going to see that the impact will be felt by us, even here in UK.
Inevitably.
Yes.
But I don't think...
How will that...
On a scale of things, I don't think it ranks that high up. It's only that humans have a very insular way of looking at life. So we are the... Without getting too deep into the philosophy, we are the centre of our own universes. So our thought begins with ourselves. So we do try and think, how's it going to impact me, my loved ones, my family, my society, my community. But that's probably the wrong way to approach the subject.
What would happen if the American forces were allowed to operate from, countries like Dubai, countries like Bahrain, where they have their bases, the American bases? Is that a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility because those governments, which are out for rent anyway, have allowed bases in their countries. So if America was to make use of those bases to launch attacks, then theoretically they have that right with a declaration of war because they've paid rent and you've sold your souls and your land in the process. But this isn't about something as black and white, as simple as that. It's, again, no secret position to even look at most of these Middle East kingships as American puppets.
There's a very interesting question that's come in from a Syrian young lady. Will revenge take place?
Absolutely not. We've already seen that it won't. What you've seen overnight is the firing of missiles into an Iraqi base, which is again rented out to the Americans from Iran. Funnily enough, you saw the Iraqi government complaining to the United Nations about the Americans breaching their territory and their territorial sovereignty, but no such complaint has been raised by them about Iran firing missiles into Iraq. And the episode 1 of the revenge is over because no Americans have died.
Yes.
It's been a nice, managed, controlled show of tokenism. And you've seen the Iranian foreign minister, I think it's Javad Sharif, tweeting saying, we've struck back, etc., etc., running their own propaganda narrative on it. And if America were to, retaliate, then we'd do this, this, and this. But you've seen how losing, like I said, the second most powerful person in their society, the head of their army, it's quite difficult to explain to someone who hasn't either lived in or come from one of those societies the level of power that is associated with those positions where they're not democracies, for example. The assassination of that person being retaliated to by the firing of a few missiles where your quote-unquote enemy has no casualties isn't revenge. The episode 1 is over, and then there isn't going to be revenge because ground realities are a lot harsher than words that you can just utter. And to engage in a full-blown, full-scale war against the United States, Iran would need the support, inevitably need the support of its true, one overt backer in Russia and a little more covert in China. And I don't think on a global scale that they are economically or politically willing or able to engage in a battle of that nature were it to come to a direct head-to-head. So
is it a diversion? Is this a diversion? I mean, we from what's happening.
That's what one of the conspiracies I did.
It's a conspiracy.
I didn't want to engage in because intent is not always very clear. So I think it's probably stretching the facts or reaching to say that this whole global potential catastrophe has been created just to try and distract from something else that's slightly troubling. I'm never a fan of those.
Yeah, but is it a conspiracy theory? I mean, we in our own country have Brexit, okay? So we've stopped talking about Brexit for a little while.
But what's Brexit?
We haven't stopped. We discussed the presidential elections in the United States. Have we moved? I mean, has that?
But if it was for the presidential elections, which I suspect is definitely a factor for someone like Trump, it is definitely a factor. That wouldn't be. I wouldn't describe it as a distraction. I'd say he's trying to hone in and focus on. Look at me, how brave I am.
And he did make that comment this morning.
I'm doing these things. Yeah. Obama didn't do this. Vote for me. To put it in his extremely limited and simple vocabulary, that's kind of where he's headed with that, if it were for that. Distraction would be something that you're trying to divert attention away from. I don't really think it plays that role. That it's too big a thing, because I don't really understand on a global scale what is a more pressing, more concerning issue that you try and distract from by creating this. And that's what I'm not buying that conspiracy.
No. It's very interesting that we have almost stopped thinking about many situations that have been happening, and the reason I mentioned Brexit and the president election, because now our TVs are covered with news about could there be a war, is there a war, there's been an attack. It's not going to happen. There's speculation. People are worried.
As they well should be.
Yeah.
But like I said, maybe I'm either delusional or optimistic, but I don't think this goes to war. This doesn't go to war simply for the same reasons. And again, I'm trying to employ some empiricism to this, where past events inform you about future events. Since 1979, they've both been going at war and telling us that they're about to go to war, and they never have. So 40 years down the line, I'm quite confident that neither of them, especially Iran, can afford to get into a war of that nature, because it won't be fought by America on American territory.
No, it won't.
It would be fought by proxies and countries like Saudi, again, governments rented out, will be more than willing to help. They've been trying to urge America to do something like this. Israel will be more than willing to help, and it will be catastrophic for the region, and it will be far, 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 far greater in its impact and the negative repercussions than Iraq and Afghanistan were. I'm not sure whether that's something that we rush into hastily, and by we I mean the West.
The West. This morning, or this afternoon, I think, when the president made a statement, he categorically stated that as long as I am the president of the United States, Iran will never have nuclear weapons.
And you can't stop that, can he?
Right.
That's again a good line to come up with. This is my thought on that.
Yeah.
Being the child that he is in his thought, he's tried to strip away a lot from the American society, both domestically and internationally, that he thought were things associated with Obama. So he's got out of that deal, but I see a deal imminently on the horizon in the next couple of years between those two again, and this time he'll be able to put his name on it, and therefore he'll have achieved peace.
And this is why this is the question that I posed earlier, that maybe it was wrong for me to say that a fall guy, but is he someone who's, it's not the brightest of the spark, and that someone else is pulling the strings at the back?
There's absolutely zero doubts about that. The certain groups, think tanks, policymakers, and lobbies in America hold untold levels of power. They do pull the levers of said power. They do pull the strings of their puppets, and that's both directly, by dictating policy, and through slightly more covert, indirect means. Campaign donations. There are certain lobbies and corporations and fundraisers which literally donate millions to a campaign. It isn't an act of charity. They expect something in return in a capitalist society. They're not spending millions for a certain just out of the goodness of their heart. So there's a couple of groups in America who probably do want a war with Iran, and someone like Trump.
Just in America?
Well, we're talking about America.
Yeah.
In America,
yes.
In America, there are a couple of groups. One is inevitably the pro-Israeli lobbies, and that includes a lot of what I'd call the slightly more right-wing Republicans, and the evangelical Christians who need that doomsday scenario to happen for apparently the return of the Messiah, which is the talk of the town right now anyway. So there are a couple of groups who probably do want to end someone as unstable, as Trump probably could be persuaded, but given the fact that I don't think American foreign policy is made on such tenuous grounds that they jump into events or into acts on the whim of, like I said, an idiot. I don't think you'll see that transpiring, because I think they lose more than they gain from that. You saw Russia's graveyard being dug in Afghanistan and the collapse of its empire. America's further engagement without going into full-blown war could signal a weakening of their hold in the Middle East and their bases in the Middle East, and a greater role for China and Russia. That's a risk I don't think America wants to take, because this world revolves around money, and the economics of it are not particularly sound for the United States.
You know that, I know that. Well, what is the solution? How do we get rid of this? How do we become, and I'm talking about as not just the West. I'm talking about countries where you have the ability to do something. So you have Saudi Arabia, you have Pakistan, you have Turkey, you have Malaysia, you have Indonesia.
All those countries are willing to help.
Right. So where are they?
All those countries are willing to help Iran get attacked because of the politics, which again you blame both sides for. One, Iran, I've already pointed to them, their involvement in all manner of sectarianism, and their failure to try to establish any sort of unity with people who are not Shia. But the other side are definitely not blameless in this, and are at least equally culpable. Saudi, everyone, like I said, knows Saudi's engagement and involvement and the position they hold in American eyes. They're second only to Israel, but everybody else you mentioned, Pakistan, Turkey, tell me any of these countries that isn't an American stooge and an American ally, quote unquote. Pakistan's been the most reticent to come forward with anything anti-Iran, and what they've managed to come up and muster is will remain neutral in the situation. Well, that's all good and well, and it's probably born out of a fear that it's on their border and they don't want it spilling over into Pakistan. But the truth of it is that if, I hope obviously this doesn't happen, but if a war were to take place, those immediately surrounding countries couldn't possibly remain neutral. It's not a situation where you can actually see that level of bloodshed and remain oblivious to it. Switzerland managed it in Europe, but I don't think anybody else ever has.
Qassum Solaimani was fighting Daesh. Yes?
Okay.
Yes?
Okay.
So
I'm not sure he was.
I'm
not sure he was.
Okay. So we are speculating here. Maybe he was.
No,
but this
no,
is what
no,
has been
no,
said, isn't it? That
he factually might have been,
Yeah.
but when we phrase it that way, it makes it sound as if it is a noble act. We've touched on Iranian foreign policy. ISIS arose, I'm not going to go into the detailed context of that, but ISIS arose from American involvement in that area within Iraq directly. The overflow of the ISIL and transformed into ISIS into Syria is a direct result of American involvement. At that time, Iran provided active support again to the Americans covertly in toppling Saddam. Ahmadinejad said this in an interview to the New York Times in 2008. So I'm not speculating on the words of some reporter or journalist. In fact, he said it in a manner of anger and disgust that this is how we are being rewarded. This is how we are being repaid. He was trying to show his fealty. So yes, ISIS held certain areas of Syria, and Iran is fully backing an allegedly Shia, I'm not sure he is, but a secular dictator, a secular tyrant in Syria, in Assad, and they had to clear that country from all anti-Assad elements. One of them happened to be ISIS. So that small phrase when you say he was fighting Daesh, Iran didn't go in fighting Daesh because Daesh were bad representatives of what they claimed to be Islam and were murdering Muslims. It went in because they strategically and geopolitically went to shore up one of their dictator friends who is involved in just as much cruelty, murder, and war crimes as ISIS were. Probably more, because he has, planes and chemical weapons handy. ISIS were a ragtag militia by comparison. So backing a greater tyrant and in the process having to fight the absolute vile and evil of ISIS was an inadvertent happenstance. They didn't set off from home with the noble intention of, we're going to go and fight ISIS because they're giving Islam a bad name and killing innocent people. That was never the intent. It was a foreign policy tactical move. Sometimes America ends up on the quote-unquote good guys' side, right? But it's always for American interests. This was always for Iranian geostrategic interests. So people, when they try to eulogize again and say he was fighting Daesh, the circumstances led to that. But
so could there be, the Daesh has sort of declined, haven't they?
Yes.
They've
lost a lot of their territory and grip in the area.
Could his death, could Qassum Soleimani's death actually give Daesh a boost?
Not necessarily if the institutions are institutions, because this, again, like I keep saying, this wasn't Qassum Soleimani's personal vision. It may not have been, but this was the Iranian government's foreign policy. And the Iranian government has funded, controlled, weaponized, and fully supported militias who are involved in just as much criminal and barbaric murder and slaughter of people, including Hezbollah, within Syria. So I don't really think that you get to do that moral grandstanding. ISIS, would they arise? Your question was? Possibly. I'm not sure the death of an individual leads to that, to be quite honest with you, because the Iranian government's foreign policy doesn't change. The Iranian government still sees Assad as an important pawn, again, in securing their interests within the Arab nations, and to have him secure and theoretically secure and safe in his seat. They have been willing to fight and will continue to support and fight, as far as I can see, any groups who are going to threaten their own interests in the area. So I don't really think that it gives ISIS any breathing room as such.
Okay, but there's a question that's come through here. On a bigger picture, what is the solution do you see as Muslim man living in the West? What is the solution? How do we? I think that the question that the young lady is asking is there a solution to this?
Well,
I think the young lady is Syrian, and I think she's coming from that context. Is the people in Syria have died. Millions of people have been displaced.
Have been displaced and died as a result of these two powers' strategic games with each other.
So what she's asking is where do you see the solution?
This is going to sound extremely pessimistic, but we could be here for days and discuss at length every complex crook all of the tiny details, the nuts and bolts of this, where we could try and theoretically, hypothetically put things right, or we can try to work with the actual ground reality. And my message isn't that this is inevitable and we should allow it to happen, but it sounds extremely simplistic in nature. As long as you continue to have a divide amongst the Muslim Ummah, as long as you continue to be part of this disease on a global scale of nationalism, where you are Iranians and Iraqis and Pakistanis and Saudis, as long as you continue to frame your thoughts, your philosophies and your political culture in those terms, this will continue to happen on repeat ad infinitum, as far as I can see. But that's what I mean by when I say the solution sounds extremely simplistic. It requires sincerity and goodwill on the part of those who happen to be the leaders of Muslim countries and nations as they stand, because otherwise you will continue to be these small bites that will continue to be eaten one after the other. Iraq has suffered, Afghanistan has suffered, Kashmir is suffering, Muslims within India are now suffering, Burma has suffered, Palestine continues to suffer. Across the globe you will continue to see this happening because every individual, again going back to that situation where I was speaking about, our thoughts begin with us as the focus, as the central point of our own philosophies. We continue to see the problems of other people as that's his issue. We don't see this as the issue of the Muslim Ummah. And until you do, you will not put this right. You will continue to be too weak to stand up. You will continue to, with your sloganeering that people like Tayyip Erdogan are involved in. You hear the odd thing from Pakistani mullahs here and there. Iran continues to do it. But you will never be proactively and practically in a place where you can firmly stand up and stand against injustice and cruelty and murder where it happens unwarranted. Until that point, we'll continue to discuss this, and it will.
I was going to read, Adnan, I was going to read this as a concluding remark. It was sent by, actually on social media by Mohammed Jahangir, who you and I both know. And exactly what you're saying, and I want to read that, but before I read this, what is stopping the Muslim leadership to say that, this guy's death has galvanized the people of Iran? What will it take to galvanize the Muslim Ummah?
Well, because you're starting again, the phrasing requires honesty and sincerity from paid slaves, and that's a bit of a problem. All of these people are either indirectly compliant or direct agents of the powers that be, all of them. And I genuinely, as I said, all of them, I'm trying to think of an example who may not fit that narrative, and I can't think of one. They all continue to play and peddle certain narratives.
So we're never going to get out of this mess?
No, because it's to be my use is akin to kufr, so I'm not going to go down that line to say that the situation will never change. What I'm saying is expecting, as your question does, for these so-called Muslim leaders to suddenly realize what it takes is, I think, placing expectations in the wrong place. You're going to need a mass awakening and a mass education and a mass understanding of the Islamic framework, values, roots and foundations amongst the Ummah at large, and from within that you'll get a group rising to call towards haqq. You're not going to get these people transforming it, not that I can see.
I have a question here from somebody, Faizan Sheikh, saying, knowing Trump's non-credible history, do you think America to retaliate in a foreseeable future in a disproportionate manner after Iran's recent retaliation? I know you've talked about it.
I've talked about it already. I don't think there'll be a disproportionate response at all.
No.
I think there'll be a managed response again. You'll get some degree, obviously, because they're both going to play this face-saving game. And actually the funny part is that the escalation of hostilities usually leads to the parties coming towards negotiations and peace talks and the table, and you'll see the other so-called other actors, the Europeans who were involved in the framing of the original framework and the original agreement, coming back to the table saying, come on, let's sit down, because the slightly ironic part of this attack is that allegedly, according to the Iraqi government, Qassum Solaimani was delivering a message to the Iraqi government, who was trying to arbitrate and mediate between Iran and Saudi and their hostilities. So these backdoor channels are forever active. There'll be no disproportionate response because they both want to see and want to control the circumstances and consequences, and a fallout can spiral out of control very quickly, as America has seen in Vietnam and as Russia saw in Afghanistan.
This, as I said, this was sent by Mohammed Jahangir. Can I just read out to you, because what you've been saying, this कहते हैं ना उर्दू में कहते हैं निचोड़, तो जिस पर कहते हैं इसको निचोड़ था, and this is what he says: as long as American forces and bases are in the Muslim world, there will never be any peace. It is time for the Muslim world and masses to say no to the presence of United States forces in the Muslim world. I hope that Muslim countries with US bases or warships in their waters do not allow the US to use them to attack Iran. That would make them accomplices to any US war against Iran and subject to retaliation. These bases and forces are in Turkey, Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE. Countries like the UAE are not as strong as they think they are. An attack on Dubai would destroy the economy and that of the United States, who have massive interests there. I also hope that Pakistan's leader Imran Khan and President Erdogan have the good sense not to support the United States or some Gulf countries against Iran. It's the last bit that's quite interesting. British and Western politicians must also get their forces out and persuade the US to leave Iraq and the region. Just as they claim they want their countries back, the Muslim world want their countries back, free from Western colonization and imperialism. Muslim countries must develop their own joint peacekeeping and security forces.
I'll say three brief things.
Yes.
One, you started off right at the beginning with American bases. Military bases are not established for peace purposes.
No.
So them being there, not allowing peace to develop, it seems like 2 + 2 is 4. The second thing about Muslims should rise up and ask the American forces to leave. That's kind of what I was alluding to. But what is very important in that, and you might have got the sense from my anger towards Iran in this, that I was taking an anti-Iran stance. Absolutely, categorically, no Muslim country should ever be complicit in the murder that would take place of millions of Iranians. Never, even in the slightest context. Even allowing the United States to refuel their planes over your land. Nothing. That's absolutely definitive. I'm not saying that Iran should be attacked. I'm hoping that there will be no war. But Muslims do need to wake up to the reality that the Americans are not in their countries for charitable work. Military bases are kept there for strategic, war-related purposes and war-related purposes only. So as long as they're there, they will A, continue to exercise their strength, and B, continue to feel like they have a right to dictate what it is you can and cannot do. And so long as you are in the weak enough position to be bullied around, the bullies will continue to have a field day with you.
And so we can sleep peacefully that there will not be World War III.
Allah, that's. I've given what I think. I don't think you saw a war in 40 years, despite many peaks and troughs in those hostilities. I don't think you're about to see one now.
No, Alhamdulillah, as we say. We've picked some very difficult questions, and I think what Mohammed Jahangir sent, and I think that that's the last bit that I really want to, if I can just read the last bit again. It's very important. Muslim countries must develop their own joint peacekeeping and security forces. And I think that's what we really need to do, not only as a community, but as ummah. And it's so important that we develop our own initiatives. We have that. We have the capabilities. And as Adnan so rightly said, we're not looking for a war. Nobody wants a war. There will not be a war, hopefully. Inshallah, that we'll wake up tomorrow morning and we might see, as Adnan, what did you say about, what did you call?
You can call him that yourself. You don't have to keep attributing
No, the reason what I'm saying is that I want to make sure. But you see, I used to call him
any of the superlatives.
Any of those adjectives. when I see President of the United States, I often wonder, maybe he's better suited for the nightclub, not for as a President of the United States. You know, that finger on that button, that really worries me. I hope that, this was the first community platform show. We hope to bring you much more. This is your community platform on uctv.co.uk. You have a subject matter you wanted to discuss? Call us. I will read the telephone number again, and I do apologize that my telephone gave me a little bit of a hiccup, but do call up on 01254 413 or of course you can share your message on Facebook and on the other social media. We're here, and we hope that you will join us. And then I'd like to say thank you again. You know, it's been a long time since you and I've spoken. I think we're going to do a lot more.
We'll see.
Yes,
We'll see how
we'll
this one
see.
goes.
What do you mean you will see? You will do as you're told.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, and look after your neighbor, whoever they may be, and remember all of us in your dua and the ummah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.